we are here today to release the Renewables on the Rise dashboard, which is a new online dashboard designed to document the growth of clean renewable energy all across the country. So I am joined today by a handful of great speakers, including Tony Dudsik, the Associate Director and Senior Policy Analyst for Frontier Group, Sonia Agarwal, the Special Assistant to the President for Climate Policy, Innovation and Deployment, and Michelle Solomon, who's a Policy Analyst in the Electricity Program at Energy Innovation. And in terms of an agenda, I'll start by walking through some of the top line findings of the report, and then Tony will walk through some of the key national and state trends. And then we'll hear from Sonia about White House plans to accelerate clean energy deployment. And Michelle will discuss the projected impacts of the recently passed federal clean energy tax credits on our environment and our health. After that, we're excited to take your questions. And for the Q&A, we'll make it possible for you to unmute yourself. And if you could use the raise hand function in the reactions toolbar of the Zoom platform, that would be great. And then we can call on folks and you can unmute yourself and ask your question. So again, today, Environment America Research and Policy Center and Frontier Group are releasing the Renewables on the Rise dashboard. And we put together this dashboard to document the growth of key clean energy technologies over the past decade in states all across the country. I'll start with just some of the top line findings from this year. Bottom line, America now gets more than 3 times as much power from the wind, the sun, and the earth as we did a decade ago. And we're seeing clean energy grow in all 50 states around the country. Now let me get into some of the technology-specific numbers. In terms of wind power, America produced enough wind power to power 35 million typical homes in 2021. That's almost a 3-fold increase compared to 2012. Solar power, too, has surged the past decade. So America produces enough solar energy to power 15 million homes in 2021, which is 15 times as much solar energy as our country produced a decade ago. Battery storage is growing by leaps and bounds. America now has 4.7 gigawatts of battery storage installed, which is 32 times as much as we had a decade ago. And then energy efficiency, which we often call the first fuel, continues to improve as well. The energy efficiency improvements that were installed in the year 2020 are going to save America almost 368 terawatt hours of power over the lifetime of those improvements. Those energy savings are enough to power 34 million homes for an entire year. Now, the improvements in clean energy technology don't just apply to the electricity or power sector side. We are also seeing the technology improve for transportation. Americans bought almost 647,000 plug-in electric vehicles in 2021, which is nearly a 13-fold increase compared to 2012. And the charging infrastructure to power those vehicles is also increasing. Last year, the number of electric vehicle chargers nationwide exceeded 120,000 electric vehicle charging stations, which is up 20-fold from 2012. So, in summary, clean energy is growing by leaps and bounds all across America. But given the climate and environmental challenges that we face, now is the time to accelerate clean energy adoption even more so that we can have cleaner air, cleaner water, and a livable climate for our children to grow up in. Okay, that's the end of my comments. I'd now like to turn it over to Tony Dudsik. Tony is the Associate Director and Senior Policy Analyst at Frontier Group. Tony has been a leader on transportation and energy policy for close to a decade and has been quoted in media outlets from the New York Times to National Public Radio. Tony, let me hand it off to you.
Thank you, Johanna. It's great to be here. I am going to share my screen. This is always the moment of truth to see if this works. So good afternoon. As Johanna mentioned, I work with Frontier Group. We are a research and public policy organization whose mission is to provide information and ideas to build a cleaner, healthier America. And the dashboard that we're releasing today is the latest in a series of annual reports that we've produced since 2017, tracking the progress of renewable energy across the country and in the states. Now, the growth of renewable energy in America is often portrayed as a national story, but it's really a mosaic of state stories. And I want to take a couple of minutes to use the dashboard to illustrate some of the key state stories that we are seeing in this year's data, and also to provide you with an idea of how you can use the dashboard to explore and tell stories of your own. First, the national map shows that renewable energy is growing rapidly as a share of our electricity consumption. In 2012, North Dakota produced enough electricity from the wind, the sun, and the earth to cover 36% of its electricity consumption, and that was the highest in the country. But by 2021, there were 7 states that were producing enough wind, solar, and geothermal energy to cover at least half of their in-state electricity consumption, with the leading state being South Dakota with 72%, and Iowa not being all that far behind. Now, down below the national map, there are a series of interactive charts and dashboards that allow you to explore the progress of individual technologies: wind energy, solar energy, electric vehicle sales, and the expansion of electric vehicle charging, energy savings from electricity from utility energy efficiency programs, and battery storage capacity connected to the grid. This year's data show that traditionally leading clean energy states continue to set a high bar for progress. California, for example, has long been a national leader in wind energy and solar energy and in the rollout of electric vehicles. But one thing that we see in this year's data is a rapid increase in the amount of grid-connected battery storage that is connected to the electric grid. That is a result of some commitments and investments that the state of California has made just in recent years. And not only is California the #1 state in the country for battery storage capacity, but its capacity far outweighs that of the second leading state, Texas, which itself is seeing a significant growth in battery energy storage. And not only is this critical for supporting the next wave of renewable energy development in the states, ensuring that we can support more clean energy on the grid, but it's also beginning to pay real dividends, as energy storage was a key factor in California's ability to avoid blackouts during the massive heat wave of a few weeks ago. But it's not just leading clean energy states where there are interesting stories to tell. In fact, we're also seeing states that have for many years been left out of the clean energy transition beginning to show up in a real way. In states like South Carolina, which again, up until about 2016, 2017, had barely any solar energy at all, you're starting to see steady, significant growth in solar energy deployment. And that's also true of other states in the Southeast, like Georgia and Virginia, which we can compare using the tool. And for now, the penetration of renewable energy in those states is still relatively small. It's only a few percent. But what it does show is that this rapid growth suggests that there really is a place for all 50 states in America's clean energy transition. Now, the Renewables on the Rise dashboard provides policymakers and reporters with access to information that will help you to understand trends within your own state and across states. But we also think that there are some ways that this could be useful information for the general public as well. So let's say, hypothetically, you live in South Carolina, you have an electric vehicle, you're looking to move somewhere in the country, and you want to see, how quickly is the state that I'm considering moving to rolling out electric vehicle charging? You can actually do that to evaluate different states and their trajectory in electric vehicle charging using the tool. Repowering America with Clean Energy is a 50-state project, and the Renewables on the Rise dashboard highlights the impressive achievements of longtime clean energy leaders and also shows promising signs of growth in states all across the country. It's important to remember, though, that the rapid growth of clean energy across America is no accident. It's largely due to years of public policies at the local, state, and federal level that have incentivized and sparked the growth of clean energy. At the bottom of the dashboard, we have a few suggestions for how local, state, and federal governments can continue to build on that momentum, going toward a future of 100% clean and renewable energy. And while it's worthwhile for us to note and celebrate the progress that's been made so far, let's be clear that that future of clean and renewable energy can't come fast enough. The climate crisis and also the impact of fossil fuel consumption on our health and well-being demands that we move faster. The Inflation Reduction Act, as the next speakers will discuss, is a big step forward in achieving that clean energy future, but there's still more work to do. States will need to implement key aspects of the IRA, and individuals, businesses, and communities will need to take advantage of its provisions to replace fossil fuel-powered equipment with clean energy. Moreover, state and local policy leadership will continue to be critical in fueling the clean energy transition, including ambitious goal setting like that of the 10 states that have already committed to achieving 100% clean or renewable electricity. With continued strong policy commitments from local, state, and federal governments, I hope that someday soon we will be able to look back at this map and see a country that is powered entirely by clean and renewable energy sources, helping us to address the climate crisis and also protect our environment and health. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Our next speaker is Sonia Agarwal. Sonia is the Special Assistant to President Biden for Climate Policy, Innovation, and Deployment. And she has served in the first ever White House Office of Domestic Climate Policy since day one of the Biden and Harris administration. Prior to working at the White House, Sonia was the co-founder and the vice president of Energy Innovation, where she acted as the founding executive director of the Climate Imperative Project and directed the team that developed the open source energy policy simulator, which analyzes the environmental, economic, and public health impacts of climate and energy policies. Sonia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Johanna and Lisa. And I agree with everything that you said at the top, as well as you, Tony, and really appreciate all the work that has gone into this very cool new dashboard. So I will talk a little bit about the federal policy angle of all of this, but I also just want to say at the top that I completely agree this is a partnership between all of the leaders across all of society to make this happen, because we need to be moving further, faster in order to meet our climate goals, as Tony so eloquently said at the end of his remarks. So just to start on the president's view on all of this, he campaigned on a bold vision to tackle the climate crisis in a way that we have never seen from a U.S. president before. He promised to restore our leadership on climate and build a clean energy economy that will benefit all Americans, an economy that lowers costs for families, provides good paying jobs for workers, and delivers healthier air and cleaner water for all of our communities. And he committed to that clean energy and climate progress clearly on day one when we re-entered the Paris Agreement. We codified for the first time in history a federal target of reaching net zero economy-wide emissions by no later than 2050. We also codified in executive order, our target of 100% carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035, a world-leading target that now other countries have begun to adopt. And he followed that up just in the coming months after, with a target for 30 gigawatts of offshore wind operating in America's waters by 2030. That is just to encourage, as a part of that 100% clean electricity mix, our diverse set of energy resources, and to try to give a boost to an industry that now we are seeing really begin to take off under this administration, and we know will be an important part of our energy mix. On Earth Day, he then followed that up with a target to cut economy-wide greenhouse gases by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels in 2030. And I'll just point out that is a faster reduction rate during this decisive decade than would be required to be on a linear trajectory to our net zero target by 2050. So the president understands the extreme urgency of our climate crisis and the availability of incredible clean energy resources that can help us meet those targets in the near term. So that's why we also continue to work with Congress to secure the bipartisan infrastructure law later that year, which at the time was our nation's largest ever investment in strengthening resilience, in cleaning up legacy pollution, in building our clean power grid, and many more topics that lay the groundwork for our further action. And that year, we set a record, bringing on enough new solar and wind projects to power 10 million homes. And it's really just so great to see tools like this one that you all are presenting today to help make sure that we understand whether we are on track, moving fast enough to actually hit our overall goals. Clean energy is now the biggest job creator in America's energy sector, with over 3 million Americans employed in clean energy jobs in 2021, which is why the president is so excited to continue the work in this area and worked so hard to land the Inflation Reduction Act with Congress, which is the most significant climate legislation in US history, projected to have 10 times the climate impact of the next highest impact legislation in terms of climate. It positions the United States to meet our climate goals and bring down consumer energy costs at the same time, increase our energy security through more clean energy production and investment in clean energy manufacturing here in the United States. So even as we continue to advance additional federal executive actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and hit those 2030 targets, we are incredibly focused on implementing all of these new historic policies, the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, to drive the largest possible climate impact and the most clean energy deployment that we can in the coming years, as is, of course, the subject of today's conversation. And we are very much looking forward to continuing our work with states, with cities, with tribes, NGOs, and community groups across America to make this, to make the most of this once in a generation truly opportunity to shift our economy to clean energy and reap all of the benefits that come along with that in terms of public health, in terms of economic benefits, cost savings, jobs, and the climate benefits. So thank you for having me today. And I look forward to all the more work that we will all do together in the future.
Sonia, thank you so much for joining us. And if you see President Biden, please thank him on our behalf for all of his leadership on this issue. I'm glad you mentioned the environmental and public health benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act, because our next speaker, Michelle Solomon from Energy Innovation, is planning on touching on exactly that. Michelle is a policy analyst in the electricity program at Energy Innovation. And in that role, she focuses on accelerating the transition to a clean, affordable, and equitable electricity sector in the United States. Before Michelle joined Energy Innovation, she earned her PhD in material science and engineering at Stanford University. She also worked on electric vehicle policy at the California Energy Commission and served as a Congressional Science and Engineering Fellow in the office of US Senator Edward Markey, a longtime clean energy champion on the Hill. Michelle, we're glad you're here. Looking forward to hearing what you're saying.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Johanna. And yeah, thanks to the previous speakers for all that they've shared and highlighted so far. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, yeah, so as Johanna mentioned, I'm going to be talking a bit about what exactly the impacts of this, transformative, biggest climate legislation we've ever had will be. So here at Energy Innovation, using our energy policy simulator that Sonia originally worked on, we were able to do some modeling and really look at what the impacts of the Inflation Reduction Act will be. And so what we found is that the Inflation Reduction Act will have significant benefits and really bolster the progress that we've been making on renewable energy that's being highlighted by the Renewables on the Rise dashboard. So we found that first, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions really significantly using the IRA by up to 2,500 million metric tons to 2,800 million metric tons below 2005 levels in 2030. And that's about 37 to 43% below those 2005 levels. Again, putting us really on a path towards reaching that goal of 50 to 52% reduction by 2030 that Sonia mentioned. We also found that along the way to these emissions reductions, there would be important public benefits, including the creation of up to 1.3 million jobs annually through 2030, as well as the prevention of up to 4,500 premature deaths from air pollution, as well as the reduction of up to 120,000 asthma attacks each year. So as we push forward on these emissions reductions, and build up our clean energy economy, we're going to see really important economic and public health benefits. So looking a bit deeper into these impacts, we find that the biggest emissions reductions come from the power sector as a result of the increased renewables build out. And so we find that with the incentives from the IRA, the power sector has the potential to generate 72 to 85% of electricity via clean sources in 2030, due to the addition of around 800 to 1,000 new gigawatts of solar and wind. And the important thing about the IRA is that not only does it make clean energy cheaper by extending and expanding tax credits more than we've ever had them before, but it also removes really big barriers to clean energy deployment. And these barriers include debt that is still carried by fossil fuel plants that are costlier to run than local renewables would be, and international supply chains. So the IRA includes programs to refinance that fossil fuel debt while reinvesting in fossil fuel dependent communities and helping them diversify their economies. It also provides manufacturing tax credits that incentivize manufacturing of clean energy components like parts of solar cells, wind turbines, batteries, and inverters to build those supply chains domestically and really bring those benefits home. So these benefits, of course, are not guaranteed, as the IRA does not actually require action from states or utilities. And even with the thoughtful policies that really address so many important parts of the clean energy transition, there will still be hurdles along the way, including the build out of transmission to make sure that we can get all of the new renewables where they need to go. But what the IRA really does is it makes the economic case for renewables stronger than ever before. So now it's time for states and utilities to really walk through the door and bring these benefits and jobs and public health home to their own communities. Yeah, and I'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Johanna.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle.